So firstly, let me join Shuparno in welcoming our two chief guests, um, Dr. Aluwalia. He needs no introduction to anyone. He's a very familiar face. And what has always endeared me to him is the fact that we often do not agree, but there is a huge space for discussion. And I think that's what makes life so interesting and his work so fascinating and his life so fascinating, because he has always crossed the red lines that are set by professions to say, you cannot go beyond this. You need to stick within this. And he's prepared to engage. And so thank you, Montek. Thank you so much for being here with us. We are very, very grateful that you made the journey. Mr. Liberhan is a really old CSE friend. And as you know, he was the head of the India Habitat Center, but has really been a very interesting thinker and someone who's, putting light on a lot of the current issues as they are moving ahead. And that's why he's also the chair of CSE, so very privileged that we get his advice, we get his information, and I'm always calling upon him to ask him on, from everything from accounts to anything else, what to do, how to do. So very grateful that he's here with us as well. And I'm very grateful that you're all here. I mean, अभी शुपर्णो ने जो कहा, वो बिल्कुल दिल की बात है. This one gathering means a lot to us. हम लोग बहुत तैयारी करके आप लोगों की जैसे खातिरदारी करने की कोशिश करते हैं कि this is our group, very precious, very important, and it is very important for us that we keep the tradition of media professionals learning and getting briefed on the science of what's happening. It is something that has actually started, and Jayanto will remember, and today at the release of the State of India's Environment Report at the Anil Agarwal meeting, this is actually, Sukanya, can you help me to put my presentation on? This is actually a real tribute, Montek and Raj, to our former director, Anil Agarwal. It's, as we see it, and I will talk about my presentation, my assessment of the year. ये वाली जरा बंद कर दो. ये दोनों. हाँ, perfect, perfect. And I will talk about it. I look forward to this conversation I have with all of you. I think about what have I learned over the year and what I want to share with you in terms of the assessment, the extraordinary book that Richard puts together, the State of India's Environment Report, collates all this information so that we can share it with you, bring the information. But the point I was making is, why AED? And why the State of India's Environment Report? For us, today is really a tribute to Anil Agarwal. Anil was the founding director of CSE. He was a journalist. He started his career in Hindustan Times, moved to Indian Express, and then to the IID, and then came back to set up CSE. And his aim of setting up CSE was that he wanted an institution that will marry the two skills of journalism with academia. And so for his thinking was that journalism skill is that it is timely, it brings the information as it is happening, and that captures the imagination of people. But academics is rigorous, it brings detailed information, in-depth knowledge. So for him, the creation of the first State of India's Environment Report, the work that we do at CSE, really was to bring both those skills together. The journalistic skill, the timeliness, the ability to explain things from the ground, what is happening, track that development with the rigor of academics. And that's really what we try and do with our work. We try and do through the State of India's Environment Report. And that's also a tribute to SOE. And I really am grateful to Richard. I really am, because I did not have the courage to keep this tradition going. And he has single-handedly ensured that this tradition of CSC, the State of India's Environment Report, continues. So I'd really be grateful if you can give him a big hand. The first State of India's Environment Report was done when many of you were not even born, okay? In 1982. It was a report which helped the country to understand why should India care about its environment. It was a citizen's report, a report card from people to government. The second State of India's Environment Report came out in 1985. And in fact, the then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi was so impressed by the report, he asked Anil to make a presentation to every parliamentary committee on environment and why it is so important for a country like India. So this is a long tradition. And the idea with the report is that when we write every day, we get a snapshot. Aaj kya hua? But we don't get a full picture. So the report collates that information, the analysis, the trends, for us to understand the big picture as well. Because the snapshot is as important, but so is the big picture and connecting the dots. So that's really what the State of India's Environment Report is. And again, I'm really, really grateful to my colleagues who have kept this tradition going. And that brings me really to the third reason for this Anil Agarwal dialogue. This is a tribute to our colleagues. Now, when I say our colleagues, I'm not only counting CSC, I'm counting all of you. Okay? This is the community. And I wrote here yesterday when I was writing this, and I want to very clearly say, this is the community which at one level drives the change. So all the people in the civil society, all the people at CSC and others who drive the change. But equally important is the community which amplifies the message. And that is so important because only then do we build the momentum for change. And that's really why today's day is so special for us. And please, I mean, this is not just words. We really mean it, that this is so important. And I want to thank, in this case, Shuparno, who has really, again, made sure that this tradition continues. It would have broken. It's tough to find the money, I can assure you. But Shuparno, make sure that at the beginning of the year it is, Acha, let's fix the dates for the next AD. Kab kar rahe hain? Kaise kar rahe hain? And thank you, Shuparno, for keeping the community together. This is, I think in these dark times, we all need each other more than ever. And I think it's important, therefore, for us to meet, to just understand from the other what's happening and how we can do our own work. I'm not asking for a network here that every story has to be written together. It's just about bringing all of us together as a community. So I said this year, 2024 is the year that the world changed. Why do I say that? One, it is the year that the climate changed. When I was in Rio in 1992, and we were talking about the Framework Convention on Climate Change, the impacts of climate change seemed very far away. And whatever we talked about, it was about modeling. हाँ, scientists कह रहे हैं होगा, monsoon का कोई impact पड़ेगा, कुछ होगा. We are living it today. In 2024, each day, some region of the world or the other was hit by extreme weather events. And we learned, ye chala gaya. I think power cut. It takes a second to come back. We're on solar, huh? I have to, jab Rajneesh दिखाएंगे You have to go and see our full solar system and how we export and import to the grid. And we learned that the poor are worst impacted, but we also learned that climate change is a great equalizer. So the fires in LA and the houses of the richest and the most famous have gone down in flames, and they don't have insurance to cover their losses. You have to understand climate change is a great equalizer. So yes, our farmers are impacted, but so are the rich in the world. And that is a lesson that we need to understand. Today, scientists are saying this is the epoch of the Anthropocene, where human activities have significant impact on the planet's climate and ecosystems. And there is more and more evidence that every planetary boundary is being close to being breached. So if you look at the State of India's Environment Report, and this chart is from there, you will see every region of the world was impacted because of climate change and the extreme weather events that happened. This is a database that is put together by us at CSC, my colleagues Rajat and Kiran put this together. We take every day, so Ashok ji is here, Anil ji is here. We, the Indian Meteorological Department puts together a daily report card of where, in which part of India has there been an extreme weather event. And remember, IMD has defined extreme weather event. We have not defined it. They have defined extreme as saying more rain than normal, more temperature than what should be there at that season, at that time. So they have defined extreme weather. They put together a daily report on their website, but they don't put together a consolidated report. So my colleagues actually take the trouble to download, and you have to understand how painful all this is. You know this as journalists. हर दिन की रिपोर्ट डाउनलोड करो, हर दिन की रिपोर्ट में से जो निकला है कि किस रीजन में क्या हुआ है वो एक डेटाबेस में डालो. So we are compiling this database. And if you look at it, what it's basically saying is that out in the months, in the first 9 months of 2024, 255 days out of 274 days, India had one extreme weather event in some region or the other. Lightning, heavy rain, heat wave, cold wave, cyclone, snowfall. And all this is the definition of extreme as defined by the Indian Meteorological Department. So we have to be clear that the impacts of climate change are happening now, because climate change is not about one snowfall. It is about the increasing intensity and frequency of extreme weather events. That is what you're beginning to see happen in our world. But what else happened in the world? 2024 is the year when half the world's population voted. And what is interesting is that voters voted against climate change in the richest countries of the world. And it is important for us to understand this, because these trends are going to be important for our future. Fear and insecurity in the world is leading to changes in government. There is fear of immigration. There is also fear of climate change policies which are driving up prices. So on one hand, there is the fear of people coming in, but there is also the fear now of governments taking action to reduce their greenhouse gases. And then there is the fear of the rich being left out of jobs. And what was very interesting, and I wrote an article on this, is that how the young voter, so for now, till now, we've been hearing about the Greta Thunbergs of the world and all the young people in Europe being so anxious and worried about climate change. Yet, if you look at the data of this last year, the young voters, and particularly, sorry for all the men in the room, but young male voters have moved more towards right-wing parties. And I'm calling them right-wing. I mean, I don't care right, left. The point is they are climate deniers. These are parties which are saying very clearly, voted to power, we will not do windmills, voted to power, we will stop. And of course, the ultimate is Donald Trump, which is drill, baby, drill. So we have to understand that this is a moment in history when, on one hand, climate change impacts are increasing. On the other hand, the denial is also increasing, and that's a lot also because that now these countries have to really take serious action to reduce emissions. Now, it's also important for us to understand that how these, what I call the super cycles, are impacting each other. The fact is, climate change, and I've talked about the increased frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, these are also breaking the backs of the already poor. So floods, drought, pest attacks, we know are not single-day events. Your reporters, you see the ground, you know that जब एक दफे बाढ़ आती है तो इसका मतलब ये नहीं होता कि बाढ़ एक दिन में चली जाएगी. बाढ़ का जो दुष्प्रभाव है वो रहता है, लोगों की जिंदगी तबाह हो जाती है, उनके जानवर मर जाते हैं, उनके पास कुछ जीने के साधन जो थे वो खत्म हो जाते हैं. तो the impact of these increased frequency and intensity of extreme weather events is that people will lose the ability to cope, and they are migrating. There is a report which Richard has been writing about for now 3-4 years, which is the World Migration Report. And this report actually now shows us that more people are migrating in the world because of slow onset climate change events than they are doing even because of war and conflict. So when you think of migration, you think of Syria, you think of wars in Africa, you think of that. But now that it is clear that these increased intensity frequency events are also leading to migration. And as the world gets warmer, this will increase. So you can see the cycles coming together. On one hand, fear of migration is increasing and people are voting against climate change. On the other hand, the more we do not act against climate change, the more there will be more migration and more destitution. So you're really creating a world where both ends are pushing against each other. And then, in fact, I wanted Montek to reflect on, I mean, I know Montek will talk about this. So Montek, I call this the revenge of the rich. So we, if you look at the 1990s, for most of us, we were looking at the ecological globalization that the world needed, the agreement on climate change, biodiversity, desertification, all the agreements that were needed because one country's impact had exceeded the boundary. And so you needed an ecological globalization framework, rules so that we could live together in one planet. But at the same time, you had economic globalization and you had WTO coming in. And WTO's basic framing was that we will move production to where it is cheaper. And why is it cheaper? Because there are less environmental rules and less labor rules. Now, as a result of it, production from the rich worlds actually moved out to those parts of the world, to our parts of the world, and we have benefited, others have benefited. We all now are locked into that system of economic globalization where that production has moved, but the rich countries did not do anything to reduce their emissions. Now they're having to take those actions. And now, therefore, there is anger against the government, against renewable energy, against electrification. And in some senses, Trump has only capitalized on this anger. And they want their jobs back. They say that they want manufacturing back. And the question today is, where will the labor come from? And more than that, when they get the manufacturing back, will that not lead to more emissions now in their own countries? Till now, they had exported the emissions. I mean, China's emissions have skyrocketed because it's also manufacturing center of the entire world. So we are now really, as I call it, the one super cycle is impacting the other super cycle. And that's the state of the world today. But finally, and that was at the end of the year, and it's a too large a development for us to ignore, that the world has been trumped. And there is no question in my mind that this is bad. There is no question in my mind. Climate change is being denied. Action to combat climate is being dismantled in the United States. Drill, baby, drill is the mantra. Fossil fuels are back with a bang. But what we need to worry about is two different impacts. One, this will mean that the US emissions will increase. Now, we have to worry about this because we had thought the US emissions had peaked in 2005. Now, particularly with artificial intelligence, and you may have heard Donald Trump often talk about the fact that with artificial intelligence, they will need to double their energy consumption. And he's now talking about captive plants in every data center to generate electricity to run the data centers. But more than that, what worries us is that not only will the US increase its emissions, but the US will be followed by all other countries. And that it will be easy to wind back the actions that we need to take. And this is when, and I want to make this clear, this is when the world has exhausted its carbon budget. Now, if you look at the carbon budget, and this is the data on the carbon budget, what is the carbon budget? The carbon budget is simply the amount of carbon dioxide the world can emit from 1850 to 2030 to keep the temperature below 1.5 degrees centigrade rise. That's the budget. That's the appropriation of the budget that has happened till 2019 and what is expected to happen to 2030. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is that you have to remember that the United States, the biggest was 24, and it was expected to go down to 22. But now with Trump, its share of the global budget will actually increase. China is 13, was expected to go up to 16. So we are basically talking about no space for the rest of the world at all. The appropriation that was done is now going to be complete. There are no apologies about it. The word climate justice, the word climate equity has become a dirty word. Now, the problem that we should have is that what happens to us? We need to grow, we need to develop, we need more energy. So where will that come from? And that's the big question that we have in the world today as the world moves towards 2025. So what then is my overall assessment of what we call the polycrisis? There are many wars. The first war we are completely losing is the war against nature. That is lost and losing. We are basically heading towards an existential crisis as temperatures increase. And as I explained, Trump will make it worse. But there is another war, which is equally interesting, which is the war with China. And the war with China right now is the war over the old economy versus the new economy, the green economy. Because China today controls all the rare minerals, the battery technology for making the new green economy work. Now, here is interesting, and I think as journalists, we have to watch out. Today in the morning, I'm sure, as all of you are, I'm addicted to Trump. So the first thing I do is to open and to check what Trump has said today. And what Trump has said today is that he has got the Ukraine deal signed. Okay? Now, what is the Ukraine deal? It's about rare minerals. What is Greenland? It is about rare minerals. So we have to understand the geopolitics now in the world. Earlier on, when we were all writing about all this, it was the oil politics of the world. Are Iraq kyun ja rahe hain? Oil chahiye. Now it's the war is over the rare minerals. But the question, and I find that a fascinating question, that even if Trump goes back on his electrification plan and his plan for renewable energy, saying this is all in Chinese control, the fact is China has overcapacity in these technologies. So what will China do? Will it become the new reason why the world will move towards greener transition because it has the technology and it wants to sell? So this will become a very interesting question. The other very interesting question to which I have no answer is, so now, right now, the globalization, the economic globalization, the one I talked about, WTO, is being dismantled by Trump. It's no longer free trade, it's free trade. Now, one idea is that this could lead towards localization, move from globalization towards localization. Indonesia, for instance, has said it will not export its nickel. It has said that you come and produce batteries in Indonesia. We will localize our production. Okay? Will it lead to more localization, or will it lead to a more unfair trade regime, which is bad for the planet and bad for the people? I don't know. But it is something that we need to keep looking out, watching, and understanding. Now, in all this, and I want to move to the second part of my, what do we do? Do we just say Trump is doing this, so we should do nothing, and climate change now is history? I would argue with you, we cannot afford not to act. Why? Because we need environmental management for our own sakes. We need to reduce the health impact burden of pollution. We need to provide water security at a time when there will be more rain and fewer number of rainy days. We need to provide livelihood security to farmers so that they can grow food without losing soil fertility and add to cost. We need to act. And for us, climate mitigation is not the primary objective. It is the co-benefit. We do environmental management for our own sakes, and the additional benefit is to reduce greenhouse gases. So that's really got to be our strategy as we move on. In the SOE, we have data on why this is. The data on health's impact is clear. The air pollution, no, please come, Amitabh. Sorry we started, but thank you for coming, Amitabh. I think everyone knows Mr. Kant, so I don't need another gentleman who doesn't need an introduction, but thank you for coming. Really grateful. So as I was saying, Amitabh, I was at the second point of my talk where I was explaining not only is the geopolitics of the world changed, but we cannot afford not to act. And I was explaining why. For us, climate change is only about a co-benefit. It's about what we will get in addition to the improvement that we need in our world. We need to clean our air because the health cost of it is too high. The number of years we lose because of dirty air is not acceptable to all of us. It is also getting warmer at night because of the heat is increasing. And Rajneesh will talk about this. This is data that he has put together, which is how nights are getting warmer. And you will see this is for Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, Hyderabad, Bangalore, and Chennai. We're also getting more humid. And the reason this impacts is that the human physiology is made in a way that even if the days are hot, at night, you cool down. And as you cool down, these are particularly for people who don't have access to air conditioners and to all the other instruments that we use to cool down our bodies. They need to cool down. And the data is showing the highest mortality. People die at night now because of the fact that nights are not cooling down. But again, the challenge is that this is about climate change, increasing heat, but it is not about climate change. It is also the way we are building our cities. We are destroying our green areas, our water bodies. There is more concrete. There are more vehicles. All that is giving out heat. All the air conditioners that we use are giving out heat. So all this will make our cities more unhealthy. So as I was saying, we can't afford to say that ये किसी और की problem है, ये हमारी problem है. And we have to fix our own problem. If we build more livable cities, we will also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But we are building more livable cities because we don't want people to die in our cities. That has to be our focus as we move on. Rajneesh will present you this data, but I found it fascinating. He has looked at how urban centers are turning into heat zones in different cities, and he will present this tomorrow in greater detail, but you can see how urbanization is having a huge impact on the increase of temperatures. So what then is our good news? What is our state of environment 2025? One, there is good news, and I think we need to celebrate it as well. There is huge environmental consciousness, and we need to recognize that. In 2025 Delhi Assembly election, when CSTS went out and did a poll on what were the reasons why the AAP government was voted out, first time I have seen voters say Yamuna, state of air, and garbage. Which means that we have reached a point where these issues have become part of, and this is not, you can't say ये तो elite issues हैं, कुछ middle class colonies में फर्क पड़ा है. There is a large number of people who have talked about these issues, which means these issues matter. Then I'm always asked, but India mein to nobody cares about climate change. Nobody cares about environment. And I always respond saying, go and ask a farmer of India and ask them about the state of their land, ask them about the state of their soils, ask them about the state of their water. वो बताएंगे आपको कि हमारे लिए जलवायु परिवर्तन मतलब रखता है. वो climate change word नहीं जानते हैं. जलवायु परिवर्तन वैसे ही हमने इतना कठिन शब्द बना दिया है कि किसी को समझ में ही नहीं आता, मगर वो समझते हैं कि कहीं ना कहीं असर पड़ रहा है और जमीनी असर पड़ रहा है. So I think we have to understand that this consciousness is deep. Indian industry understands they need resource security. They do not want conflict. So it is about our survival. It is about our health. And if you look at it, our government, both at the union level and at the state level, has incredible programs. There is nothing wrong with the intention of government. We have programs to clean the river. We have lake rejuvenation programs. We have clean air programs. We have waste programs, Swachh Bharat. We have a green states program initiative. And we need to recognize this. And particularly, I will say to you, recognize it in the age of Trump. That in the age of Trump, we still have huge commitment to safeguarding the environment. And our government has that intention to make sure that this is done. This is not small. I will not go through these chapters, but as you will see in the chapters of SOE, many of these issues that are important in the country are listed, whether it is plastic, the extended producer responsibility of plastic, whether it is the whole issue of biodiversity, which we will also talk about, the whole challenge of health and antimicrobial resistance, which is increasing because not just because of the antibiotics we get off the counter, but increasing in the food that we produce. And that's important because in the food that we produce, whether it is the animals or whether it is aquaculture, the antibiotics that are used, and the government and the efforts to make sure that these are reduced. Then, of course, there is, and we will talk about the avian influenza. Climate change, I have spoken about. Renewable energy is a major issue, but there is huge commitment to 500 gigawatts. What's happening? Where have we reached? Where else we need to go? It is very clear for India that energy security is critical. We need to double our energy consumption between now and 2030. But we cannot afford pollution. So what do? We also need to provide energy to the poorest woman who still uses biomass to cook her fuel. This is in spite the incredible program of government on Ujjwala. So what now needs to be done? Then, of course, rivers. And then the whole issue of water body, migration and heat, as I have mentioned, these are the big issues that Richard curated, put together. And I think the State of India's Environment Report, which we will release right now, is really a report which will help you to understand both the good news and the bad news, a state of affairs to tell us what more can and must we do. So what then is my assessment of 2025? When I look at the State of India's Environment Report, and I look at what's happening, as I said, there is commitment. But the problem is that investment is still not showing up in the scale of improvement that we need. And I will argue with you, it is because of three reasons. One, the scale of change on the ground is massive. We have increased our population, we have increased need for extraction, we have increase in demand and consumption on one hand, and then we have three main problems. Why the scale, in spite of the intention, in spite of the investment, we are not seeing the transformation that we need in our world. One, the programs are not designed for scale of transformation. They are still designed to do something. But what we need now is to understand that the other side, whatever is wrong is happening, the pollution, the population, that's huge. So the scale, the program scale has to be massive in terms of delivery. And now for that, and the second biggest weakness is the institutions for monitoring and regulations are weak. In earlier ADs and my writing, I have talked about, I have openly said to you that the system of environmental clearance in India is so broken that we should just close it. It does not work for industry and it does not work for environment. And this is not about this government, it is about progressive governments who have made sure that the system does not work. It is about committees who decide, who really have no accountability in terms of the way the program is going to be monitored for effectiveness. But third, and that's what I want to focus on, क्योंकि problems बहुत हैं इस देश के अंदर, मगर हमें करना क्या है, that is what we need to talk about. The third part of it is we need a new approach for environmental management that works for us. We cannot follow the conventional way, which adds to cost and is affordable, so not affordable and not inclusive. This to me is the most important issue if we want environmental management to succeed in India. So we need to make sure that we can have development, but not pollution. And we also have to make sure that we do not first pollute and then clean up. You know, the Western cities tell us that हम लोगों ने अपनी हवा साफ कर ली है, which is true. You go to New York, even the air is clean, and you always come back saying, why is it we can't clean up our air? But the fact is, New York may have cleaned its local air, but the transport in New York has contributed to climate change. So it's also important for us to understand that the scale and the method of environmental management, where you keep polluting and keep cleaning up, doesn't work for them and will not work for us. If you take Yamuna, and I want to focus on Yamuna because, and we will talk about it tomorrow as well in a session, Yamuna is in news again, which is wonderful because I think it's an opportunity for us to talk about not just Yamuna, but all rivers of India. So why is it we are not able to clean Yamuna? We're not able to clean Yamuna because we don't accept the reality of India, which is that vast numbers of people in our cities are not connected to the official sewerage system. So CSC has done what is called shit flow diagrams, where we have tracked the shit in cities, कि कहाँ से आती है और कहाँ जाती है. And you will find the bulk of people are in unconnected, non-sewered system. But the river cleaning works on intercepting sewage from officially connected households. And the rest of the households dispose their sewage through tankers, which again go into the same drains. And now as a result of it, and I brought this map for you, just for you to understand, these are the 22 drains of Delhi which lead into the Yamuna. Now, the irony of this is that if you look at Najafgarh, you look at Kapasera, you look at Pappalgaran, you look at Basant Kunj, all these sewage treatment plants clean the water. But they put the cleaned water into the same drain, which carries the untreated effluent of many colonies. So we are actually making sure, because of our focus on sewage treatment plants, we are making sure that the clean is mixed with the unclean. And as a result of it, the end impact at the river is the same, which is pollution. We have just done a paper, and Shushmita will talk about it tomorrow. We have taken the DPCC data, and we are showing you how the quality of river has not improved, even though the government says that 6,500 crore have been spent on cleaning the river in the last 4 years. This is government data. Now, I can abuse the government, but I don't think that's the point. The point is we need to understand why is it not working, and then to be able to suggest what needs to be done to make it work. And that's really what we are now. We are saying that stop playing the catch-up game with sewage treatment plants, because as many sewage treatment plants you make up, the gap between what you have built and what needs to be built remains the same, 50%. So we need a different approach. And the new approach has to be to accept the reality of India, accept the fact that large areas in India are not connected to a sewage system. Accept that this is modern India, not old India. That now these households which can use tankers to take their waste to a sewage treatment facility, they are part of your system. Make sure all tankers are registered. They have GPS, and all sludge is taken for treatment. Make sure that this is not mixed, and then recycle and reuse every drop of treated effluent. And this is where the whole issue of lakes and ponds in our cities, both needed for heat management, but also for pollution management, and also flood mitigation. The more the sponges in our cities, the lakes and ponds are there, the more they become points to also recharge and clean your sewage. So the bottom line is we need imagination, we need a new direction, and most importantly, we need the politics of inclusion. If it is not inclusive, not affordable, it cannot be sustainable. Anumita will talk about how in air pollution, the biggest challenge today is not just electrification of individual cars, but electrification of the mobility system. How do you make sure there are more people in buses? So you can buy an electric bus, but if the ridership in buses goes down, you still have a problem of air pollution. So you need to be able to look at it in terms of the agenda for mobility transformation. My biggest issue has been, my biggest failure in my life, if I was to say, has been not to get my second agenda going, which is that I believe forests should be cut. We need a wood-based economy. But there is huge resistance to this because there's always a idea that अगर जंगल काटेंगे तो जंगल तबाह हो जाएंगे. और मेरा मानना यह है कि जितना ही पेड़ लगाओगे उतने काटोगे और उतने फिर लगाओगे अगर you build the right incentive structures for a wood-based economy. In terms of agriculture, we are saying invest in improving resilience and productivity without adding to the cost of growing food. Because we know in India, food inflation is one big concern. We can't afford the cost of expensive food. So how do you improve the resilience without adding to the cost of food? And in the case of waste, and you will hear about it as well, the whole issue of circularity. Waste should not be waste. Waste should be reprocessed. Anumita will talk about this, but I've talked about how in air pollution, you're really not focusing on where you really need to go. If you look at the second bar chart and you look at the yellow part of it, that is private modes of transport that are increasing in our cities. So you will see that the private modes are increasing even as we are talking about air pollution, and clearly that will not work. So finally, I want to take a moment to just say that these are tough times, and times are going to get tougher. As I spoke about at the beginning, the whole geopolitics of Trump, the whole green lash that we are seeing in the world, these times will get tougher. But we need to keep pushing for change. And as a community, we need to keep looking also for where there is good news. What is working so can inspire others to make the difference. Because you and we know one thing for certain, that this issue is about our survival. Environment is not about luxury. It is not about something you have after you have got rich. You need the right to clean air, however poor you are. So it is about our survival. And you and we know that the threat is real. Whatever Donald Trump may say, the threat is real. And we have to act, and we have to keep, all of us have to make sure that we remain on track to keep reporting, writing, bringing news so that the world does not lose focus. Thank you very much. Get a few questions? Yeah. I have 5 minutes, and then we can do a quick release. Anything? Yes, Janko?
Very good morning to all. Very quick question. Sunita, you pointed out that in 2024, 50% of the world has voted apparently against the climate change. And I was just wondering why it has happened. And just very quick question, is it because that climate change action on ground has been pitted against the livelihood opportunities? And with COVID making the livelihood opportunities even putting to the fringe, that disparity becomes bigger, and that becomes a voting issue.
No, absolutely, Janto, but let me get the facts right. I said 50% of the world has voted, but I didn't say 50% of the world has voted against climate change. Those two lines don't go together, okay? In particularly the rich countries, if you look at Europe today, there is a growth of the far-right movement, which is anti-climate change. The Netherlands, Italy, Germany now, other countries of the world, and of course the US. There, and I agree with you completely, I think those countries are now finding that it is difficult to make the transition to green transition. And they have not thought this through enough. I think in our part of the world, I mean, I look at it, Janto, you and I have been part of this conversation. How much criticism we got when I said that India can't get out of coal tomorrow, okay? And we were abused saying, oh, CSE is sold out, and we said, no, the reality of India is that we have 70% of our electricity comes from coal today. We need to double our electricity consumption. So we need a roadmap to get there. And the roadmap will be, and we supported the government's position, which is that in the doubling of energy, we will double on clean energy. And our position with the government has always been clean up your coal plants, which has not happened, different matter. But the fact is, the positioning that we took was much more rooted in our reality. Whereas I think the Western economies, and they need to act, they should have acted 30 years ago. They did nothing. Their emissions have not come down. And now to drive down their emissions, they came up with, though I think Biden's Inflation Reduction Act is a very good piece of legislation to get investment into poorer districts of the United States and to invest in the right things. But it takes time. And I think the green lash that you're seeing is a combination. But we need to worry about it because this will only add to emissions, and it will make sure that we are all more insecure. So public health and climate change. So this whole discussion has been going on, and I really strongly believe that the reason Delhi has moved towards taking action on clean air is because it is linked to our health. Anumita is sitting here. She is responsible, and please blame her for everything that she is responsible for making sure that air index happened. I mean, how much she fought to get the air index done. So this index, Montek, links the quality, the level of air pollution with the impact on your health. Now, obviously, we wanted it tougher, but we had to give in certain language. But it is there, and it is on your phone. And today, when you get up in the morning and it tells you that the air quality is bad, it doesn't just give you a number. It tells you that that bad air quality will lead to more respiratory diseases, that the old must not get out of their homes because of it. So the link to health has really driven the outrage and the action. Now, it's the same problem is there with water. Why are our rivers not clean? Why are our rivers sewage canals? Okay? Because at the end of the day, we all move to bottled water. What is the impact on our health because of river? Yamuna बहुत, मैं तो बार बार ये कहती हूँ कि यमुना का खाली क्रिमेशन नहीं हुआ है, मगर वैसे साइंटिफिकली किसी भी नदी के अंदर जब 0 डिसॉल्व्ड ऑक्सीजन लेवल होता है तो वो जिंदा नहीं है. और यमुना के अंदर डिसॉल्व्ड ऑक्सीजन लेवल जब पल्ला और वजीराबाद में यमुना एंटर करती है तब 5 होता है, और ISBT जो पहला मेजरिंग पॉइंट है तब 0 हो जाता है. उसके बाद जब तक यमुना दिल्ली से निकलती है, जो है ओखला बराज, तब तक वो 0 रहती है. तो मगर दिल्ली वासियों को हाँ ठीक है आज दुख हो रहा है, और मुझे अच्छा लगता है कि दुख हो रहा है, क्योंकि अगर ये दुख हो रहा है तुम इसको थोड़ा इस्तेमाल करके कुछ काम करा सकते हैं. मगर टेक्निकली इट रियली डजंट मैटर. क्या फर्क पड़ता है आपको? आपको तो पानी, शुद्ध पानी मिल रहा है ना पीने के लिए. So Mathura, very interesting. Agra, downstream of Delhi is Mathura and then Agra. Agra has had to set up a water treatment plant, which is more expensive than a sewage treatment plant. Because the quality of water Agra gets is so polluted. So as I keep saying, we all live downstream. And if we don't fix this, then Haryana will send us polluted water. So we have to fix this because we are all live downstream. ठीक, एक last question. Yes, Sudha, आप पूछ लें. हाँ, and then I will. I'm available. मैं 3 दिन यहीं हूँ आप लोगों के साथ. And
so this point you made about environmental monitoring agencies,
yes,
we all agree with that. We need to wind it up. And often the PCB is associated with the health department, the health ministry or the health department. It is in many states. So when you talk about environment and health, then what is PCB doing in that department?
So that's from Kerala,
Kochi.
So as far as monitoring agencies, this is the bugbear for us. Remember, you cannot clean up the environment if your institutions are not strong. Nothing can happen. आपने एक wand चला के नहीं होगा. आपको institution चाहिए. आपको deterrence चाहिए. Now, CSC has for the last, I think, 15 years now, or maybe even 20 years, we have been analyzing how poor our governance and institutions are in terms of the environmental clearances. And the system is broken. You can't repair the system by just repairing it from one end to the other. I'll give you a simple instance. Montek, a project comes for clearance and you have it divided into firstly forest, environment, coastal. We have been arguing do 1 environmental impact assessment. 2, it goes to the EIA is done by the project proponent, which means that it's basically done to clean up. Then the project goes to a committee which is faceless, nameless, reputationless. Okay? It goes into a committee who looks at the file, and now if the project is controversial, तो उनका एक तरीका है, उसके अंदर 1000 conditions बना देंगे. मैंने एक project देखा था, I was asked to be a chair of a committee to look at a project. And us project ki one of the conditions there was that the project proponent will send all girls to school. I'm not joking. Okay. So the trick of clearing a project is as lamba the conditions are, the better it is for, it feels we've done our job. We've given you the conditions that you're. Now, nobody is monitoring the conditions. Why? Because the conditions are cleared under the EP Act. The EP Act can only be monitored by the union government and its regional offices, not by the pollution control boards. So the regional offices of the Ministry of Environment are 5 across India, understaffed, overworked. As a result of it, no monitoring happens. So you clear a project with the intention of not monitoring the conditions that are set. And industry complains कि हमारा transaction cost high है, हमें bribe करना पड़ता है, हमें there's a huge amount of corruption in this. So we need a change in the system if this is to work. And that's where the PCBs come in. PCBs, frankly, are doing as good a job as they can. So let me make it very clear. They are overworked. I mean, when they started off, they had the Water Act. Now they have the Air Act. Now they have the plastic regulation. Then they have this, they have that. So we need to look at those institutions, give them strength, give them good people, give them capacity. But without institutions, strong regulatory institutions. Now, this is the world of Elon Musk, I know, where regulation is a bad word, institutions are a bad word, public institutions are a bad word, everything is going to be done by the private sector, but it's not going to work. Montek, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, no, the only reason I wanted to say something is that you were continuously directing things at me. It make me
Oh, yeah.
quite nostalgic because I remember in the old regime, you were the spokesman or spokesperson of criticizing whatever was going wrong. So I'm really glad that you're continuing to do that. So
Montek, we are in permanent opposition.
so yeah.
We are very happy
I
with
just
our
want to
position.
remind
Always
everyone,
in opposition.
anyone who's coming here for the first time might want to ask the question, "Hey, Sunita ko gussa kyun aata hai?" You know, and I just want to tell you, it's nothing new. 10 years ago, she had the same. By the way, I admire the fact, and thank God for the rest of us, that you do maintain that spirit. A couple of comments, and we'll get chance later.
Yes.
I mean, needless to say, I mean, I think you're doing a wonderful job. And I think this institution is doing a wonderful job. And I think it's really great that you've got a whole bunch of journalists to come and listen to you. All that's wonderful. You know what strikes me, and I've been more recently, most of my life I've spent doing the things which Sunita believes causes pollution, bad air, increasing GDP, you know, what we used to call goods, but what she calls bads. And probably historically, if you think about it, she's right. So I got into this late, mainly because after I left government, I wanted to do something that I wasn't doing earlier, which is climate change. I mean, climate change virtually didn't exist when I was through. I mean, it was sort of somewhere there. And it's quite interesting. But, you know, people I know who write tell me that for any good story, you need to have a villain. You know, so if you don't have a villain, there can't be anyone good, or whoever's good is just doing an ordinary job. Okay. And I mean, these stories are very good when the villain is clearly identified. Now, 2 villains have been identified by Sunita. One is Donald Trump, and the other is Elon Musk. But, you know, all said and done, I don't think our environmental problem is because of what the United States either is doing or is not doing. The truth of the matter is, I mean, the enemy is us. And in so many of these things, all of which, by the way, are correct, the real truth is that we, as a system, as a society, as a people, are just not motivated to change. Now, I don't know how you get people motivated. And hopefully, by having all these, get-togethers and so on, you're conveying to people that they can send that message across. I mean, like for years, we've been talking about climate change on the grounds that climate change causes externality. I mean, you emit CO2, that causes damage to the whole world because it raises the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. And if you have to mitigate, you bear the cost, full cost of whatever CO2 you don't emit. And the benefits of that go to everybody, okay? And that's why we need global cooperation. And as she rightly pointed out, since 1992, which is exactly 32 years, we've been trying and we're just about to undo whatever we've agreed upon. So I don't know what's going to happen, but fair enough. But, forget about climate change, forget about that for a minute. Look at water. There's no other country involved in us mucking up our water supply. It's all us. It may be upstream us, it may be downstream us. You may cry about the farmer. You may say the farmer doesn't want to spoil the fertility of his soil, but that's not true. The farmer wants free fertilizer so that he can scatter it around and cause incredible runoff, which damages the river and damages his soil. So the honest truth is that somehow, if we make the story too big and the whole thing is a disaster, you won't get traction. Therefore, you need to zero it down. And I'm sure that's happening. Certainly water, I mean, look, there cannot be a more educated part of the country than Bangalore. And most people I know who live north of the Vindhyas think that Bangalore has actually arrived. And if they were to speak to their own political leaders, they will say, "Ki aap hame Bangalore kyun nahi bana dete?" And it's a legitimate concern, right? But the fact of the matter is, the lakes of Bangalore have been absolutely ruined. And there cannot be a more educated community, a more digitally connected community, a more whatever DPI community, but somehow that message doesn't seem to go across. So I think actually, since you're all journalists and you have to write stories that capture the imagination, I would urge you, and she said that, that you need to make things locally relevant and forget about Trump and even Elon Musk. I mean, they're both a nuisance, but the worst thing would be if we came to the conclusion, how can we do anything when Donald Trump and Elon Musk are running riot? And that it is a problem. They are running riot. And maybe, I mean, the government, Amitabh, and he's the G20 Sherpa. So this is straight up he goes to the G20 meeting, which I think is in South Africa, right? Next one. Except it's not clear whether the Americans are going to attend because they're annoyed with South Africa. So really the global thing is getting totally mucked up. But I mean, forget about that for a minute and look at what we can do domestically. And maybe, as Sunita said, if we can multiply the good stories.
Yes.
So that people can say, if it's happening here, why can't it happen here? That, I think, is really something which only a journalist can do, because you have a word limit. I mean, you can't write more than 700 words. And I mean, now, since you're all into Facebook and Instagram, it has to be a photograph and a little clip and 200 words, and that's about it. I just think we need more awareness of that. Anyway, we will discuss
No,
this.
absolutely. We will discuss it
directing at me,
after.
I thought I should respond.
No, thank you. And you've picked up the right point that whatever happens with Trump, whatever Elon Musk does, that's drama, that's a circus out there. We need to get our own act together. And our act is because of our own sakes, and we can get it right. And exactly as Montek said, focus on what's working, focus on the good news, but also focus, my view, my other plea is focus on why are we not getting it right? Because it is not a lack of intention. And that's my essential point, that don't just say government doesn't care and therefore we don't get it right. We're not getting it right because we're not doing it right. And that's, I think, got to be the main thrust.
But one
has
thing
been-
on information, for example, as we move out of what you might call infection-based, bacterial infection-based diseases towards lifestyle diseases, you're going to have a new kind of problem. How do you handle those? Now, in terms of knowledge, the country is becoming obese. Americans are becoming even more obese. All of them know that this is bad for their health. All of them know that biscuits are the worst thing you can have. But why is it happening? So, I think it has to be, it's not enough to think that we have to convey the information. Because you convey the information, if you convey the information that processed food is bad for you, and it's interpreted as we must get rid of the fellows producing processed food, everybody will be wonderful. Let's have a demonstration against Pepsi, Nestle, Maggi, whatever. But the simplest way of not doing it is don't buy these damn things. So that we're not managing to do. And it can't be because the message isn't there. Message is going out all the time. So what's wrong? That's really what we need.
Should we use the report before we go to tea? Richard, come or no? We have a tradition now. We don't package our reports because of the weight. So if you can just take it out. I also need the one of your copy. So we are releasing the report. Sorry, no packaging waste. Journalists, only journalists are so much speaking. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. Wonderful. So, Shuparno, tea now?
Tea upstairs.
Upstairs,
Yeah.
one floor up.
Yeah, one
And
floor up.
we will show you our solar roof. Come on. I mean, that first time you come, I want to quickly show you also what we have. So we had a lovely evening.